Hello. Um, so welcome to this session. It's SOA with JBoss Tools. My name is John Graham. I'm the SOA Technical Development Manager for the SOA platform at JBoss. And today what we're going to do is we're going to cover the tooling. I know if any of you had a chance to see Burr's earlier presentation or the previous presentation I did before, those are overviews, and Burr was dealing more with an actual demo in the runtime, and we're going to concentrate more on the overall tooling strategy and how you actually write stuff that works on JBoss SOA tools. So I'll just start off with a brief background on JBoss SOA. This is a standard picture that we use. You probably saw it in Burr's presentation or some variant of it. But this basically talks about the overall architecture as we conceive it for the JBoss SOA platform. And I'm going to concentrate on the middle box, where it says pluggable architecture, but really the tooling that I'm talking about really concentrates on the components that are in the middle box, which include ESB, which include transformation, which include messaging, and so on. So that's what we're going to concentrate on in this presentation. So there's two components to this. As you've probably heard before or you understand, JBoss is an open source company, so we have the notion of projects and products. So on the project side we have JBoss ESB and a number of other projects like JBPM, Drools, and so on that comprise our SOA solution at the open source SOA side, and then still open source but productized for support and service. We have SOA P. Likewise, in the tooling space, we have JBoss Tools. So this is a project. If you go to the jboss.org community site, you can find JBoss Tools, and you can get various versions of it in various incarnations, and it's based on the Eclipse platform. So this is the splash screen that we have with JBoss Developer Studio, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. JBoss Developer Studio is the productized version of JBoss Tools. So it's in the same relationship of SOA P to JBoss ESB and the other bits. Okay, so now what we're going to basically talk about is how to configure an environment. Now, how many folks here use Eclipse for their daily development? Okay, and you're developing like Java enterprise applications, you're developing web applications. Anyone developing Eclipse plugins? Any plugin developers? Okay, we got a person there. So if you've used Eclipse before, a lot of this stuff is going to be familiar, and some of it, if you haven't, some of this might be a bit odd. And I'll try to explain to you why we do things like we do, because we're integrating in. We build off of the Eclipse Web Tools Platform project, and we build on top of that. So if you're already using that for other reasons, you can start to do SOA development directly with our tools. Okay, it's going to be an experience which fits with what you already know. So we're leveraging the best of open source, but also providing you with a consistent user experience that goes far beyond JBoss, because Eclipse is everywhere, right? So the first thing that you might want to look at is the JBoss development perspective, which is known as the App Server Development Perspective. And this is a screenshot of it. It has, this fairly standard things for Eclipse views, your package view and so on. One notable thing down the bottom, on the bottom left-hand corner, is the JBoss server view, which is where we control connections to our server. So remember, JBoss ESB runs inside of a server, right? So it runs by default inside of JBoss application server. And in effect, it gives you additional SOA capabilities on top of AS. It can be deployed outside of AS with some restrictions, but in general, the use case is people deploy it on top of AS. So you're building your tools on top of that stack framework. So the first thing that you need to do when you start off with JBoss Tools and you're going to do SOA development is you need to tell JBoss Tools what version of the SOA runtime you're interested in targeting. So there's two components to this, and people often get confused. So I'm going to try to explain this in some detail. And I'll give you the parallel is between runtime environments in Eclipse, like your JVM level that you're using, and what vendor you happen to be choosing, and then versus a particular app server that you might be deploying to and that has certain other artifacts and libraries on it. So there's two components to this. So there's the JBoss ESB, which has all of the jar files that are associated with doing SOA development for JBoss. And you configure that by just going into the preferences And you can do it a bunch of ways, but the easiest way is to go into the preferences, you just add an ESB runtime, and you point to where you've installed it. And it can be JBoss SOAP, or it can be the JBoss ESB community version. And you tell it what version you have, and you click through and you're done. Also, you notice that there's a checkbox where you can customize the libraries. If you want to remove or add some, obviously that's important to do too. So this is going to set up a baseline for the rest of the development that we're going to do. The next thing you want to do is you actually want to make a connection out to a server that is using this runtime so you can actually deploy things and test things out. So the runtime is sort of a static definition of your class path, your library set. Whereas the server connection tells you, here's where my server is out there and I can actually control it. So you use the standard wizards if you use Eclipse Web Tools. This is just built on top of that. You know, depending on what version of JBoss Tools, whether you're using JBoss Tools or JBoss Developer Studio, you get slightly different options. But basically, you're just going to create a connection to AS, JBoss App Server, that has a SOA runtime in it. It'll detect that, and off you go. So what you end up with is you end up with an entry in your server view. This is a snapshot of the lower left-hand corner of my Eclipse Workbench. And I can go ahead and click on that, and you'll see in the console that I start to get information back that the server is starting up and the status. This is the same information you get from the command line if you just ran the server. Okay, so you've probably done this if you're doing AS development using the Web Tools platform, or if you're doing any kind of development, frankly, using the Web Tools platform against a JE server, then you've seen this kind of a thing. And SOA is just an extension on top of that. And then when it's started, you can actually drill in. We actually have noticed that this view is slightly different than the standard Web Tools platform. JBoss Tools extends that for additional functionality. And one thing you can do is actually drill into it, and you can see the server configuration, and you can change a variety of things on the server. And this includes both SOA-specific things and underlying server, you know, AS server things. So this is what it looks like. And then start synchronize. Well, start's pretty obvious what that means. Synchronize means that any projects that you've associated in your workspace as deployed to the server, they actually synchronize now. And when you change them and you have a dirty state that has to be updated, you'll see a republish, I think is the word that's used in that case. And this is just standard Web Tools platform terminology that we're leveraging. So now the question is, you have your server, you've defined what the runtime looks like, and you've defined a connection out to a server. Now, how do I actually go about developing services for JBoss ESB? If you saw Burr's presentation, he talked a lot about what the services are and how you orchestrate things, and they gave you a demo and everything, but now we're talking more about how you actually